beginning. Sri Lankan Airlines, you're our world.
National partners: University of Moratuwa, Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Urban Development Authority, Sri Lanka,
Institute of Town Planners, Sri Lanka,
Colombo Stock Exchange, ICTA,
the Institution of Engineers, Sri Lanka.
Cooperating organizations: JICA, KPMG, the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, Holcim. PR partner:
Adfactors PR. Research partner: Oxford Business Group.
Print partner:
Corporate Image.
Lbr Lbo Infrastructure Summit 2015.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please rise to the national anthem.
Sri Lanka, Namo, 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 Namo Mata. Apa Sri Lanka, Namo, 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 Namo Mata. Sundara Sri Harini, Surati Ati Sobramana Lanka. Jaya Jaya Dikamal Pala Guru Giri Jaya Bhumi Ramya. Apa Hata Sapa Siddhi Setta Sadana Jivana Mata. Dili Dandulana Apa Bhakti Puja Namo Namo Mata. Apa Sri Lanka, Namo, 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 Namo Mata. Beri apa vidya, Obamaya apa satya, Obari apa shakti, apa hati tula bakti. Apa ayogi, apa dianugrani, apa jivanari, apa mukti ubadi. Nama jivana jadi bitina apa kudu kelanwata. Bina pada wangina dagina anumena jaya bumi kara. Kita maga kita dukala belina, yamu bino perma. Berwada sama kita durana, namo namo mata. Apa Sri Lanka, Namo, 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 Namo Mata. Apa Sri Lanka, Namo, 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 Namo Mata.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As citizens of this country, as members of the corporate sector, as policymakers, bureaucrats, urban planners, members of academia, research community, and even students, we have a challenging task ahead of us. That is to make this city, the commercial capital of Colombo, Sri Lanka, to make it a globally competitive city. Are we among the top 10 globally competitive cities? No. Among the top 25? No. Among the top 10? No. Among the top 100? Unfortunately not. We are somewhere between 100th and 110th globally competitive city in the world. And the current projections indicate in 10 years' time, we might even slip further down. And there will be a host of other cities in the region who will be ahead of us. That, of course, based on the projections made on 2014, but since then things have changed a lot. We have a minister today who has taken the responsibility of developing the whole Western region as a megapolis. So things will certainly change. So we are here today and tomorrow to discuss, debate, learn from some of the world best and the country's best and the region's best experts on how to make our city more competitive and more attractive for capital, talent, and ideas. And that we will forge ahead and we will move forward and we will make Colombo and the Western region a highly competitive city during the next decade. So that's a tremendous task, and it's an inspirational task, and it is a challenging task. So ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to Lbo Infrastructure Summit 2015. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Honorable Minister of Western Region Development and Megapolis, Patali Champika Ranavaka. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and being here with us today. Your presence is a great honor and it's a great encouragement for us to conduct this particular discourse this evening and whole of tomorrow. I also would like to extend a very warm welcome to all our partners and their representatives here today, and most importantly to our speakers, panelists, and the session chairs. We have 30 speakers coming from 7 countries and from various disciplines: urban planners, researchers, transport executives, transport experts, and city diplomacy expert. All the way has come from Toronto. And we also have a host of technologists who are going to share with us how to build a great city. Okay, how to build a great city, and so we can learn and we can make Colombo a world-class city. So it is customary that we pay attention to the messages from those who made this event possible. First, Cinnamon Life. The waterfront project is Sri Lanka's largest private sector investment in mixed urban development project. We thank Suresh Rajendra, Roshani Moraes, and other friends from Cinnamon Life. I would urge you to visit Oculus Rift virtual reality studio, which is set up on the other outside, and you can experience what a lovely experience living in Cinnamon Life in a couple of years' time. And I believe Roshani is here, and if you speak to her, she might give you about 35% discount for one of those $1 million apartments. Try your luck. We also have the support and the assistance extended by Hitachi Railway, systems world leader in monorail design and development, in partnering with us today. I recognize the presence of Mr. Kentatsu Ito, Mr. Haru Mitsubishi, and Mr. Mangal Dev. HSBC has always been an inspiring and a long-term partner of us, always challenging us to stretch ourselves and raise our standards and to deliver a great thought leadership experience. We thank Mr. Patrick Gallagher. Thank you very much, sir, joining us today. And CEO of HSBC Sri Lanka, Chamira Vijaytilaka, Head of Corporate. Chamira Vijaytilaka, Head of Corporate. Samindra Merceline, Head of Public Sector, Kalani, and other friends from HSBC. Patrick, we enjoy working with your team. They are absolutely wonderful set of people to work with. They challenge us. They help us to deliver great experiences. And we are very happy to have you with us today, and I hope that you will continue to be with us in future events as well. Thank you. Microsoft and MID, our technology partners. It's a wonderful experience to work with our friends at Microsoft. And I started with Imran. I'm not sure whether Imran is here. He's the tallest IT executive in the country, 6 foot 7 inches or something, 7 inches. So yeah, and he has a big heart to match that. Thank you so much, Imran, Pujita, Rena, and Tilanka, and also friends who have come all the way to share their expertise with us, Vivek and Srikant. Thank you so much. And MIT team, we thank Magil, Faik, and Shanaka, Roshan, and other friends from MIT. Both MIT and Microsoft have been working with us on this event for the last almost little more than 2 months, and throwing us all kind of ideas and how to make it a great event. We also fortunate to have a number of national organization partnering with us. University of Mogadore, I think Professor Ananda Javadana will be here in a moment. He's held up in a meeting. Urban Development Authority, the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Colombo Stock Exchange, ICTA Agency of Sri Lanka, Institute of Engineers of Sri Lanka, Institute of Town Planners of Sri Lanka. Many other organizations contributed in many ways. JICA, KPMG, the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, Holcim Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan Airlines, AdFactor, and Oxford Business Group. Let's pay attention to messages from our partners.
Lbr Lbo Infrastructure Summit 2015, making Colombo a globally competitive city. Sponsors.
Welcome to Cinnamon Life, Colombo's iconic life capital in the making, a landmark project by Sri Lanka's premier conglomerate John King's Holdings PLC, designed by renowned architect and engineer Cecile Balmont. Cinnamon Life will celebrate the emergence of a new Sri Lanka. An integrated resort, Cinnamon Life will feature a luxurious hotel, residential and workspaces coming together in exacting harmony.
At HSBC, we understand when it's your business. It's never just business.
Who knows? One of these kids just might be the one to clean the oceans, start a movement, or lead a country. It may not be obvious yet, but one of these kids is going to change the world. We just need to make sure she has what she needs. Welcome to Windows 10. The future starts now for all of us.
We can innovate, and I think it's fair to say that policymakers and stakeholders are increasingly listening to what we can say or propose.
global competition is so much more now, and it has to be aggressive and innovative and change fast in order to keep up.
Airline partner.
Today is the beginning of an incredible new journey, one that's filled with surprises that will move you and excite you and add a bit of magic to your life. Welcome aboard our new fleet and the pleasures of flying direct. Welcome aboard a new beginning. Sri Lankan Airlines, you're our world.
National partners: University of Mortua, Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Urban Development Authority, Sri Lanka,
Institute of Town Planners, Sri Lanka.
Colombo Stock Exchange, ICTA,
The Institution of Engineers, Sri Lanka.
Cooperating organizations: JICA, KPMG, the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, Holcim. PR partner:
Adfactors PR. Research partner: Oxford Business Group.
Print partner:
Corporate Image.
LBR Lbo Infrastructure Summit 2015.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure and honor to invite Honorable Minister of Megapolis and Western Region Development, Patali Champika Ranawaka, to deliver his speech. May I invite Ranjan Hulagala to accompany Honorable Minister. I hope these mics are tall enough for the Minister. So.
Very good evening to you all, ladies and gentlemen. I deem it a great honor to be standing here among us you this evening at the inauguration of this very important event, LBR Lbo Infrastructure Summit 2015. I must indeed congratulate the organizers not only for this timely initiative to create a high-level professional and intellectual dialogue on infrastructure development, but also for a passionate and inspirational team making Colombo a global competitive city. Making Colombo a global competitive city is a common passion that all of us share. It is a common vision that all of us strive to realize sooner than later, which incidentally also happened to constitute a major part of the mandate of the ministerial portfolio that I assumed a couple of months ago. I believe it is pertinent to begin this discussion with the perspective of historical evolution and expansion of the city to what is today. As you all know, despite the history of the city dating back half a millennium to the time of Portuguese occupation of the maritime district of Sri Lanka, the history of the development and expansion plan for the modern city of Colombo begins in 1921. It was the year 1921. The first ever formal urban development plan for the city of Colombo was drawn up by the famous town planner Patrick Geddes, who was commissioned for the purpose of the then colonial government of Ceylon. Of course, prior to this assignment, Patrick Geddes had actually accomplished design in several cities in then British India. Patrick's theme for Colombo was to develop it as a garden city. That's his concept. The next significant planning efforts comes in 1948 in the form of Patrick Abercrombie plan, followed by another planning effort 30 years later in the form of UNDP's Colombo Master Plan project of 1978. The next development plan, formulated in 1985 under the JRJ government, recognized for the first time the long-term unsustainability of the monocentric development of Sri Lanka. This is, as we know, resulted in administrative capital being shifted outwards to Sri Jawadanapura, with the parliaments moving in there. The next plan, formulated in 1998, was known as Colombo Metropolitan Plan, and proposals for the inner and outer circular roads were brought in there. It was in 2002 that the plan for development of the entire Western Province as a megapolis region was brought in for the first time by the then Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. Ladies and gentlemen, the very proposition of making Colombo a globally competitive city indeed has to be now viewed from broader perspective. From the perspective of a wider Western megapolis encompassing the entire Western Province centered around Colombo. Why has this become necessity? Why has it become the most prudent approach to the urban development in the western region of the country? This question has to be answered from perspective of economic prosperity, social justice, environmental sustainability, and cultural heritage. On the economic front, Sri Lanka's long stagnation in the middle income territory, or rather precisely in the low middle income stratum, has long underscored the need for development of a large geographic region with the intense economic activity. The intensity of the economic activity of a geographic territory is measured by what is known as economic density, which is simply the value of aggregate economic output generated per 1 square kilometer in the region. In this scale of economic density, our capital city Colombo currently ranks well below that of Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, and some of the Indian cities as well. A region of intense economic activity is a must for a leverage in many economic potentialities that we possess as a nation. For example, in realizing the full potential of our geographical location in the form of maritime hub or as an education hub. Such a region would be an ideal platform for translating the benefits of demographic dividend that we are enjoying at present from 1992 into a productive economic capacity. And such a megapolis or metropolis would be a best position to rapidly build upon the benefits of reasonably good level of education and health services, electricity supply, and ICT infrastructure that the country is now enjoying. From an economic standpoint, this could be the most prudent way around the current inefficiencies in our macroeconomic environment, which is characterized by such as massive deficit in internal trade. Economic activity concentrated at a higher density in a wider geographic region in the form of a megapolis indeed appears the most prudent approach in realizing the dream of a high-income country status by 2030, reaching a per capita GDP of at least US $12,000 through an innovation-driven, knowledge-based economy. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, on the social justice front, no one can afford to forget the fact that we are a nation with unfortunate memories of at least 2 major uprisings triggered by absence of social justice. While some scientists continue to force a major development challenge, disparity in income distribution, as reflected by such measures of Gini coefficient, remain much to be desired. While we plan to implement a rigorous and comprehensive program not only for just relocation of some dwellers, but also ensure that economic integration to the society at large. We also plan to take adequate measure to prevent migration of some section of the middle class out of the country. The third front of our development effort is the environmental front. Although the environmental sustainability constitutes one of the 3 major pillars of sustainable development alongside economic development and social equity, environmental aspect of development has never been given due consideration in any of the previous plans of urban development in Colombo and suburbs. As much as 30% of the land extent of is lowline here in Western Province and serves as a natural basin for holding excess water during the heavy rains, thereby protecting the area from fluvial floods. All construction activities have to be undertaken making adequate measures for protection as well as proper management of these low-lying areas. The concept of green city will be adopted as the guiding model in the environmental aspect, thereby effectively complying with the measures to mitigate global warming and climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, the fourth front of development would be that of ensuring adequate and comprehensive measures for preservation of cultural heritage in the area. All judicious measures will be put in place in order to ensure that the likes of those harmful effects that has been taken place on the cultural heritage sites in the urban development activity carried out at Kandy and Anuradhapura, for example, will be totally avoided. As we know, intertwined with the cultural heritage is the spiritual well-being of the people. While measures to develop the physical, social, and institutional infrastructure of the megapolis are undertaken, effective measures should be taken to make the environment conducive for engaging religious activities for spiritual well-being as well. Ladies and gentlemen, that was about the first phase of our plan. Under the second place, our main emphasis will be on resolution of the issues brought about by ad hoc hazard urbanization. Something that is very pertinent here is the actual percentage of urban population of the country. According to one standard, we stand around 48% as against the popularly quoted figure of 18%. The figure 18% is in fact the total residing within municipal and urban council limits, which does not include many Pradesi Sabha areas which are actually urban in fact, although administratively not so. For example, Pradesi Sabha township in Homagama, Beruwala, Valigama, etc. are not treated as urban. There is a multitude of imminent issues to resolve, ranging from livelihood for slum dwellers, schools for children, and issues pertaining to the health services, and of course the inefficiency of the transport sector that pose a major impediment to economic growth. Besides this, we will launch a comprehensive program to resolve the housing issue, which in the absence of a proper land policy has resulted in houses being built in every possible block of land, removing coconut and other plantation, and land filling every possible block of paddy field in the process. Finally, coming to digital infrastructure, I wish to mention that state-of-art ICT infrastructure will not only be fully developed, but also be optimally utilized in all spheres of activity within the megapolis. In fact, the concept of smart city will be our guiding model and the direction in this regard. According to one of the better descriptions of smart city, it has triple I's: instrumented, intelligent, and interconnected. So in conclusion, my appeal to this August gathering at this important occasion of inauguration of Lbo Infrastructure Summit 2015 is, let us join hands as one single family in realizing not the probable dream, but the achievable reality of an economically prosperous, socially equitable, environmentally green, and functionally smart Western megapolis, which will certainly be the heart of well-developed future Sri Lanka. I thank you.
Let me bring it down to average human beings, right? Thank you so much, Minister, for those inspiring words and creating a vision, and also sharing with us the challenges and of course the opportunities and certain plan of action that your government intend to implement in near future, together with the civil society, private sector, academia. So what we intend to do is, what is the purpose of we meeting here today, is to create that discourse, start that conversation, so the government, private sector, academia could together work together with the other development agencies and partners. Ladies and gentlemen, let me share with you now few tips how this summit will, how your summit experience will, how you can enhance your summit experience. First, if you are come here expecting in this inauguration, Channa and Upali is making dances, I'm sorry that to disappoint you. In any case, as I understand, Channa and Upali charges about 120 million these days per event. Okay. First, my first request is, we have already emailed you. Please go to Google Play and iPhone, Apple Store, download Lbo mobile app. You have all the session intros, biodatas of the speakers, and it also has a facility for you to interact, because you also can interact, post your comments, ask your questions via SMS. So that is how we integrate. We usually don't have any paper except this small booklet. We are 100% digitally driven organization. My next request for you is to read together with the various session intros. There are a lot of other resources in our website, www.lbo.lk/summit. You have videos, white papers, news stories, a lot of stuff uploaded by various partners. So I request you to have a look and enhance your knowledge. Oxford Business Group, our research partner, they have kept some of their publications outside. You are most welcome to pick some of these publications which you find interesting. And also, if you leave your business card with them, they will that will help you to get a copy of the Sri Lanka report, which will be published soon. The other thing is this is a credit card preloaded with $1,000. Okay. Apart from that, this is going to be your access card for all your future events you register invited for. So this is keep this with you, and whenever you accept our invitation or register for an event, and that information will be loaded. And we also have some other plans to for various other benefits as well. This card is created in collaboration with MIT using NFC technology. So thank you so much. So it is now time for me to invite speakers for the first panel discussion. May I invite Professor Rohan Samaraweera, Professor Willie Mendes, and the other panelists and speakers to join us. Come to the stage, please. You are right there.
Good evening. No, not yet.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, so this is our first panel. We have some experts coming from different parts of the world, and also from different disciplines. To my immediate left is Dr. Sumila Guliani. Sumila, he has a PhD from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and she heads the urban strategy of World Bank based in Washington, D.C. And Ole Söderberg is the Chief Executive Officer of Stockholm Business Region. He's going to tell us an inspiring story about the Stockholm. Stockholm used to be in its 20s, if I'm right, in World Competitiveness. Now they are in number 8. So if the Stockholm can do that, why can't we do it? Then we have Professor Willie Mendes, the most reputed, most knowledgeable town planner, urban planner in our country. He's going to tell us why we can take that quantum leap and come to just above Stockholm in 5 years. Michael is a sustainable construction expert. Is a head of sustainability practice of Holcim. Thank you, Michael, joining us. And J.D. Sen has a very interesting discipline. He pioneered this discipline called city diplomacy. Okay, how do you position your city in the stockholders' mind? It's a great idea. And then we have Naina Mavilmada. Director General of Urban Development Authority. And today's session chair is Professor Rohan Samarajiva. Ladies and gentlemen, the first session is Cities of the Future. What do they look like and how do we build them? Please put your hands together and welcome our speakers. Rohan, over to you.
May I invite Sumila to speak? You have 15 minutes. We're not going to do introductions. You have been provided with the extensive bios in the app and the other mechanisms.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here and extremely intimidating to go right after the Honorable Minister. I will try to be short in my remarks. The challenge to the panel today was, or is, what do the cities of the future look like and how do we build them? Is this projecting? Yes, great. I'm going to, so this is an image of a future city. There are many such images out there. I think the minister very articulately laid out a vision of a future city. It's potentially very exciting. It's going to be hopefully high-tech, economically vibrant, socially inclusive, and environmentally green. And so how do we get to this utopian place, which looks something like this or other visions that you may have seen? I would like to say that to get there, we need to start from what we have today. So where are we at in Sri Lanka today? This is an image of night lights data, which shows you economic activity. So it's the night lights are a proxy for economic activity in Sri Lanka. And this image shows happening over the last few decades. So the parts that are in white are indicating the night lights and economic activity as it existed in 2002. And the red lights or the red color in there is indicating economic activity that occurred or grew from 2002 to 2012. As this image shows, there has been a significant increase in economic activity, and we are starting to see the emergence of economic agglomerations centered around Colombo, but going all the way to Galle in the south and Kandy, and then creating together in this area a multi-city economic agglomeration that's vibrant and highly productive. We are also seeing the emergence on the East Coast and in the north of single city agglomerations. As you can see on the east side and in the north. And the agglomeration around Jaffna in the north has been very dramatic in its growth between 2002 and 2012. You will also see red lights along transportation corridors, indicating the kind of development that's occurring there. Here is a different image of what's happening. Here we see in blue dots the people that fall in the bottom 40% of the income distribution. So each blue dot represents about 500 people each, and you can see the density of where these people are. And as you will have noticed, they're occurring, these people are in similar locations to the economic activity that you saw in the previous slide. In other words, even though there's been vibrant economic growth in these areas, it hasn't automatically translated in elimination of poverty or reduction of vulnerability. But on the positive side, there is definitely a chance as policy makers move forward in generating greater productivity in this agglomeration to also simultaneously tackle poverty and make this growth more inclusive. One of the constraints that everybody has talked about and is well recognized is that of infrastructure. And infrastructure deficits are limiting livability for citizens in Sri Lanka and also adversely affecting productivity of firms. So these photographs, the extreme left is a photograph from Kandy, and it shows people using an active train track as a pedestrian walkway. We are all familiar with congested roads, and on the right-hand side, you see the effects after a massive flood. And there was a very big flood in Colombo in 2010, and efforts are underway to provide the infrastructure to prevent such kind of losses happening in the future. So these infrastructure constraints are hurting productivity and livability, but at the same time, there are lots of efforts underway and lots of good potential and opportunities that can be seen. There are vibrant spaces and neighborhoods in many cities. There are urban rejuvenation efforts underway in cities like Colombo. So that is the current state as of today, and that brings us to the question of how do we build the future city given where we are today? Because this is a business forum in part, there's going to be a lot of discussion on competitiveness and firms. So I would like to focus on two issues that might get overlooked but are critical for competitiveness. One of them is how we manage spatial development and spatial growth. And the other is how we deliver a quality of life for our citizens, or for citizens of Sri Lanka. So this slide is showing you the Western province, and the parts in red show the built-up area in the Western province. The more red it is, the greater the density of the built environment. What we are finding in our analysis is that the population increase is smaller than the overall built environment increase. In other words, the built area is increasing faster than the population and can lead to sprawl and urban development. So one of the key challenges for us to build a city or a set of cities that are green and environmentally sound will be in managing spatial development and reducing sprawl and managing urban development. The current patterns are leading to congestion, and by that we don't mean just traffic congestion, but congestion in land and housing markets as well, as the Honorable Minister also noted. And the second point I want to make is that we do in our frameworks of preparing for a future that is brighter, remain focused on citizens. So here is a series of frameworks that focuses on the well-being of citizens. To the extreme left is the development diamond, and all it says is that there are 4 dimensions for citizen welfare that we should be focused on. On the very top is economic welfare, whether they are poor or rich, and their incomes, whether they're employed or not, whether they're educated or not, and whether they have decent living conditions, as in decent housing and decent infrastructure. The data that you see here is for another country and for their 15 major cities. And that diamond on the extreme left, called the development diamond, is showing you that even a citizen that is above the poverty line, has a job and has education, does not have access to decent living conditions. The next diamond zooms into the living conditions situation and looks at the different aspects of living conditions and says that living conditions are a composite of infrastructure, the quality of the unit, whether or not you're able to own your home, and whether or not your neighborhood and location are safe and well connected to jobs. And then if you zoom in further into one further vertex of the living conditions diamond, it shows you the different aspects of infrastructure that you want to worry about as an urban policymaker and planner. And that's just the infrastructure polygon. It shows you the scores for that particular country for infrastructure services like water, electricity, toilets, garbage. And as you can see, this country is doing very poorly on many of these indicators that are presented in this framework. So a set of future cities that are high-tech, inclusive, smart, and economically vibrant will have to do better by their citizens than this particular country is doing. And this has to be a key objective when we are making decisions on where to invest and how to invest. So finally, To conclude, we need to plan for inclusion of all our citizens. It will not happen automatically. The decisions we take today about infrastructure and spatial development and where firms are located will have a long-term lock-in effect. Sri Lankan policymakers must focus on alleviating the congestion effects that are present today and will come in the future. And for this, efforts in improving urban governance and urban finance are key. As all of you are very well aware, the current governance system of urban areas is a little bit fragmented and needs to be improved for these areas to function better. And if those efforts are made in urban governance and urban finance, Sri Lanka has a very strong chance of making its cities prosperous and livable and therefore competitive. Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite, yes, Mr. Zutterberg.
Thank you. And I will start with showing a short video, which is a crash course to Stockholm, that you will know more of my city after looking at this video. So please enjoy.
Stockholm is Europe's fastest growing city. A big study by PricewaterhouseCoopers recently compared 27 cities at the center of the world economy. For intellectual capital and innovation, Stockholm ranks #1. We rank #1 for entrepreneurial environment and #1 for health, safety, and security. Moving to Stockholm is not a coincidence. The quality of life is exceptional. The longest arts exhibition in the world is inside the Stockholm subway system. Also, the natural beauty of Stockholm makes it a pleasure getting around by foot or bicycle. We have 760 kilometers of bike lanes in the city, which is built on 14 islands, connected by 57 bridges. The city is made up of 1/3 parks and green spaces and another 1/3 waterways. The water out here by City Hall is actually clean enough to drink. I've had worse. Oh, it reminds me, I need to recycle a couple of aces for the rest of this. In Sweden, we recycle 99% of household waste. And thinking green pays off. In an extensive 3 years measuring air in 25 European cities, Stockholm alone aced it and met WHO air quality guidelines. The average city had twice our air pollution, the worst one 4 times more. Compared to there, living in Stockholm adds almost 2 years to my life expectancy, just from breathing clean air. So, in 2010, Stockholm was elected European Green Capital, the first city to ever receive this honor. That is not a coincidence. Last year, we were the most internet-connected country in the world. Now, I'm sad to admit we have dropped, and we are now only the second most internet-connected country in the world. But still, for the 3rd year in a row, Sweden tops the EU Commission's list of innovation in the Union. Stockholm's GDP growth last year was 68% higher than the EU 27 average. Innovative market leaders like Skype and Spotify were founded in Stockholm. That is not a coincidence. It's a great place to work, but more than that, to live and love. Stockholm has 50% singles, but it's also ideal for starting a family, for all families. If you have kids, you get 480 days of paid parental leave. Babies have subsidized childcare, and growing up, schools and university costs nothing. And according to Global Age Watch, the quality of life for the elderly in Sweden is the highest in the world. Stockholm is Europe's fastest growing city. That's not a coincidence.
Okay, so that was a little, a little bit funny thing of telling the story of Stockholm. First of all, I must say I'm very happy to be invited here and to take part in this seminar, in this conference. I've been strictly said that there was only 4 things that I could mention besides the video here. So Lakshmar, he's been very hard to me and said just 4 things you have to mention on how we became number 8 on that list that you referred to, that Colombo is on the other side of the 100 limit, so to say. First of all, let me say you're on the list. And that's better to be not on the list, because there's a lot. Most cities are not on the list on being the most competitive cities in the world. And I could tell you also that there are among, I think, 200 different ratings. So this is just one of them, even though The Economist is a very well-known newspaper. I mentioned 4 things that brought us to where we are today. And first I must say it's of course about city planning. It's about public transportation. During the Second World War, Sweden, although Stockholm was a very small city, and then the city council decided to build an underground metro system, starting during the war to plan it, and then after the war to start to dig and to build it. And that's been instrumental actually for the development of Stockholm to have this metro system. I know that's very expensive with underground metro system, but of course public transportation is key if you want to develop your city in a sustainable way. Another thing that we started about 25 years ago was also to bring a huge grid of fiber optic cables in the city, and that has been very important to develop new technologies, to develop new tech startup companies, as in the film mentioned Spotify and Skype. All those companies are very, for them it's very important to have very stable and good connections for the digital development. And a third thing I will mention is also it's very important to cooperate with the cities around you. And I heard from the minister about your great plans on the western region here in Sri Lanka. And I think that you have to cooperate with the other cities and municipalities and the local government in your region. Otherwise, people are not impressed outside in the world if you want to attract talented people, if you want to attract investments, if you're arguing in between those different cities. So I think that's instrumental. Another thing that I think is very important if you want to develop new digital companies and if you want to attract services from abroad is, of course, to start to deregulate a lot of markets. I know that local government is not, the legislation is not in the hands of the local government, but local government can open up their digital resources for companies to make new applications for traffic and a lot of other things for the public transportation. And I think that is also very important if you have a free market and you could attract different investors from abroad. Said this and showing the film, I must of course say that we have our own problem, of course, and the main problem we have is housing actually in Stockholm. Just to mention that. And of course, maybe you know that now we have the greatest migration wave in Europe since the Second World War. And Sweden is, together with Germany, the major recipient of new refugees from Syria, Afghanistan, and other countries in the Middle East, which is a huge demand for us for the housing question in Stockholm. But that was just some, I hope to get back to our experience on what we've been doing in Stockholm and how we reached the position where we are now. Just to conclude with saying that maybe one of the biggest problem is that when things going very well, you become a lazy cat and you don't catch any rats anymore. And that is the thing that I want to put up my finger and said, when it's going very well, you must work even harder. So that was a few remarks on the city of Stockholm. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Mendes?
Are my slides uploaded?
Yes, they should be up.
Yeah. Lakshman, I must say you have given me a great challenge to beat Stockholm. So I'm going to make some suggestions without playing cards, so that we can certainly beat Stockholm next time we meet. May I start by reminding and recalling all that the urban sector in Sri Lanka was for a long time, and even till recent times, considered parasitic. They were mostly understood as being parasitic on the rural economy and on the national economy as well. And that continue many of these plans that the Honorable Minister mentioned in background, it can depress the opportunity for the urban sector to make an impact in the country. Now the time has come where the government has decided, for reasons that was mentioned in the minister's speech, to create the transformation of the urban sector from what it was to what it can be. And the means by which the biggest impact is going to be done is the megapolis development that is. Now, if megapolis that Colombo is talking about is going to be competitive globally, that's an even bigger challenge. It's not just developing the urban sector from the parasitic state to a modern economy, but also to make it globally competitive. That puts a huge challenge. In that, we must also recognize that competitiveness is understood commonly across the globe. There are many that I'm sure Lbo give into that has set out the so-called themes, the factors which a city competes and also compete in the world. One of those is in fact the topic that we are talking about today, infrastructure. Infrastructure here means the physical infrastructure, road, rail, transport, airports, seaports, harbors, water supply, sanitation, solid waste management, electricity, telecommunication, and of course the digital infrastructure that we now talk about. Now these provision of these in the right way is critical in the megapolis. Now, if we are to do that, the first starting point is that we must have the vehicle to deliver them. And fortunately, in Sri Lanka, we have a compact which for the first time is under one ministry, the Honorable Minister's ministry, what we call the National Physical Planning Department. Very obsolete department in the public mind, extremely powerful. The Urban Development Authority, another institution that was created in 1978, extremely powerful law, built-in statute. The public interaction with it is because of its regulatory powers, but we have that institution as well. And now we have the Megapolis Secretariat, which I'm sure is a precursor to a Megapolis Authority that will be formed. So we have a delivery mechanism. Can we have that slide, which is just after this one, please? The next one. I don't know who's doing the slides, Ron. Oh. No, not that. We have these agencies as the delivery vehicle for promoting urban development: the National Physical Plan Department, the Urban Development Authority, and the Megapolis Secretariat. Now, all these institutions, I'm sure, are under some legal framework, and the National Physical Planning Department is generated in 1346 and amended in 49/2000. I hope, Lakshman, you will make available copies of these for the public generally too in their website, because they are extremely strong powers. The UDA 41 in 1978, amended in 4 of 82, extremely powerful again. Megapolis Secretariat, I'm sure Honorable Minister is proposing the laws in due course. And these legislative frameworks will give the background to the opportunities that can be made known for the public in the megapolis area. Now, one of the problems when you have multiple agencies is that their harmonization is also equally important. And the first thing that was understood in the year 2000 was that the UDA may be overriding the National Physical Planning Department, which was mainly intended to frame a national physical planning policy. Its approval process includes the entire cabinet. I don't know what amendments are now going to happen, but it involves the entire cabinet chaired by the president himself, and they approve what is called the National Physical Planning Policy. I have not included the National Physical Plan draft is now ongoing in the slides, but I think that shows where the major strategic land uses are going to take place. The UDA law is amended in 2000 to suggest that UDA must conform to this National Physical Planning Policy. Now, the relationship between the Megapolis Authority and these two is still unknown, and I'm sure these will be resolved in due course. Now, between these, we have also the megapolis itself being planned, but as everybody is aware, in between the megapolis itself, there are local authorities that are involved. And I'm sure the previous speaker mentioned the importance of local authorities being also beneficiaries of the megapolis development and maybe around the country as well. Now, at the moment, the central control of the local authorities, both in planning and in taxes, are hugely restraining, and the benefits that the local authorities might feel as an incentive to participate in megapolis development needs to be addressed if we are going to be competitive, as was mentioned by the previous speaker, in Stockholm. So if we are to beat them, we have to have some parallel with that. The third one is, of course, where this megapolis boundaries are going to be. Western province certainly is mentioned. Now, we don't have details accessible to us at the moment, but I'm sure tomorrow Professor Manam is going to mention the details. But we understand from the media reports that there will be three cities: aviation city around Katunayaka, port city, not the Colombo port city that we have already in place, but the concept of a port city going in the Mutwal Colombo direction, and the technological city between Malabar and Homagam. Groupings in this so-called megapolis, and I'm sure it's a schematic presentation, but the details will be known tomorrow proper. Now, the important thing in this is that the megapolis includes several other cities in between its bounds, and therefore we have to define this boundary. And if you have to define the boundary, it's important that we I'm sure the team that the Honorable Minister has also provided. There are many types of agglomerations when you team settlements. We have the continuous urban agglomerations, the so-called network agglomerations, and I'm sure that's what's going to be. Now, why I introduced this theoretical component in this is these types of urban agglomerations have their own synergies, and experiences and theories have shown what they should be. So if we are going to have an urban agglomeration in the megapolis, we certainly must choose one of these or fall into one of these, and its theories need to be addressed. And I hope the megapolis authority will exercise that option. One more point that I want to make is smart cities in the megapolis require smart planners. And the unfortunate thing that we see already happening in Sri Lanka is that despite the university, which I represent in terms of participation, is the only exclusive provider of planning education, all the urban planning graduates are in various disciplines, various kinds of occupations. None of the local authorities are engaged in them. And if that continues in the megapolis authority, we are going to have a crisis. So smart planning, smart cities, they go hand in hand. And I would suggest that it be addressed. My last point, Mr. Chairman, is that we need to also see a harmony between the infrastructure plans and the urban plans. Now, unfortunately, the infrastructure agencies and their plans take place standalone, and they have consultations, no doubt, but they take place standalone, and there is no mandate for them to follow the so-called national physical plan nor the other plans. Now, we know the crisis in that is that we have making and breaking concept. That is, you make the infrastructure and then the development comes and you break the roads again and then start. So there has to be a method by which this coordination can take place. And my suggestion is that like in some other countries, we have an infrastructure commission to provide data sharing and the so-called coordination. Maybe the Public Utilities Commission, which Ron is familiar about, can also be suitably amended to provide this. So we have all the elements in place, no doubt, in the Sri Lankan Colombo city concept to provide the competitiveness. I'm not going into the design characteristics because tomorrow there's going to be a presentation by Professor Manam on this. So if that is to take place, I'm sure our good friend from Stockholm is going to have a tough time. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Michael Shah.
Yes, good evening. Lakshman has assigned me 10 minutes to talk about what sustainable construction has got to do with making Colombo competitive, which is tough because I could talk for far longer about that. And he has also asked me to stay quite high level, which is also a stretch because to my opinion, you have to get down to the machinery room every once in a while to make the question, what is sustainable construction, tangible? So I'll take you, is it on? I'll take you on a journey, sometimes up and down to hard facts and how we can then link this to how to make Colombo competitive. In general, competitiveness has a bottom line and it has a top line. So that means in terms of sustainable construction, the question is, how can we generate something very efficiently in terms of resource efficiency, but also how can we generate something really great? So how can we balance this? And 3 topics I'd like to raise. One is about energy efficiency. The other one is about how to move people and goods. And the third one is then the general question of what is quality about? So energy efficiency, very simple chart, but very true. If we are producing energy, we are losing 2/3 on our way back to the socket. So if you source crude oil or any other kind of energy, on the first level, you're at 100%. Then once you have the diesel or the petrol in your tank, you have lost 1/3 in inefficiencies. And then when you get your mobility or you get your electric power in the socket or whatever, you have 1/3. The point I'm making is, if you manage to save one part of energy down there on on the use of energy, if you manage to save one part of energy there, you can save 3 parts of energy up in the resource part. And that brings me then to, sorry, I'm an architect, so I try to learn things from how to create buildings, but you can transfer this also to cities. Simple approach for designing energy efficient buildings. Number 1, just take whatever is for free. Shape of the building, position of the building, size of the building, solar protected from the sun, use natural ventilation, all those things which are for free. And once you have done all this, then you have saved a lot of energy in the first time. Then we can talk about efficient technologies. And like geothermal, like storing energy, like thermal radiation, all those efficient means, but they cost money. So you can do this, but they are more expensive than all those things you can do for free by a good design. And the third one is then renewable energies. Renewable energies are great. Oh, now could you hear me before? So renewable energies are great. They are the most expensive way to save carbon emissions. Number 1 is the most efficient way to save carbon emissions. Now, what does this has to do with a larger scale of urban design? This is a project I did years ago in my former firm before I joined Holcim. And this is a settlement or development of a settlement. We only knew the part number 1, which is signed number 1 here. We did not know number 2 and 3, so we did not know how soon, how large, and in which shape this settlement will happen. And we were supposed to design an energy scheme for this neighborhood. And so the solution we came up with was a very decentralized solution. So the green dots are different types of energy supplies, decentralized energy supplies, which then provided us the flexibility to let this grow and also let this shrink, which is also an important consideration for urban design. So cities want to grow and sometimes also they want to shrink. In Europe, we are encountering a lot of cities which are not growing anymore. So a decentralized, simple, down-to-earth system, not those which then only work in their entity, creates a lot of flexibility and creates a lot of efficiency. And so this is one of the key learnings in energy efficiency. Create it down to earth, make it very simple, try to take those goods which are for free in the first place and then move over to the renewable energies or to the more important, the more expensive things. Which then brings me to system efficiency in general. These are 2 slides I copied with pride from a dear colleague of mine, and they compare two major cities. On the left-hand side, you see Atlanta, the red box, and on the right-hand side, Barcelona. It's in urban design, you find those 2 comparisons very often. The size or the scale is the same. So you see Atlanta having about 5 million or 5.5 million inhabitants, is far larger than Barcelona in Europe. And if you then have a look at the efficiency of the transport system, that's the 3rd figure from the top, then Atlanta is doing 10 times worse than Barcelona. Same number of people, totally different size of an urban area, and totally different efficiency in transporting people. So it would be easy, or you could now think, okay, that's very easy. Let's move Atlanta just to the right by on the scale on the bottom, move them to the right by just implementing public transportation system, by making everything public transportation, and then it's far more efficient. But it's not that easy. So the same author provided also a slide which shows you the dependency between the density of an urban area and the public transportation system which are available. So you see Atlanta in the polycentric, low density area, and you see that transportation by car is practically the only means how you can manage transportation in those systems. It is very expensive and not very efficient to have public transportation systems in there. So you would find Barcelona somewhere in the proximity of Paris, so in the middle field, where you can have a connection or have have a combination of different transportation systems. And then the other edge would be cities like Singapore, Shanghai, really the large hubs where you hardly manage anything with private or with cars, with private transportation, which are very, very attached to public transportation. My point is that whatever your urban design is and however you create the different hubs, and we had this in previous presentations today, there's a broad variety of how you can design urban areas. It always has implications on the way you design public transportation systems. You cannot disconnect one from each other. And so, yeah, you have to bear in mind how you can then handle those transportation of people in an efficient way. And then our personal point, because we are coming from the construction sector, we are handling one of the major construction goods for building cities, is then also the sourcing and the transportation of materials, which is a big issue in construction, especially if you come to if you come to cities, because you face a lot of logistic issues if you want to construct big projects in downtown areas. And so material sourcing is one of the major issues of construction works. This is on the left-hand side, you see a picture taken two months ago in northern India. This is the Ganges River, dried out. And this is the way you can source sand. This is a future building being built in a city. A long way to go, and by the way, it's illegal. In the middle, you see a recycling plant operated in downtown of New Delhi. Buildings, existing buildings being torn down, being crushed, and then immediately on the spot being recycled into new construction materials, which you see then on the right-hand side. So those buildings are just a perfect case of urban mining, which is one of the major questions we have to answer if you build in metropolitan areas, how we can recycle the already existing materials which are there on the spot, and how can we avoid the raw material extraction. Last point, to move over, so this is all fine, but this is all basics about the efficiency and how we are doing things. Far more important is, as you also could see from the example of Stockholm, far more important is what are you creating? So what is the quality which you can supply to your people? And some examples suggest that you go vertical. On the left side, you see a picture. This is a large hotel complex, which has about 25 stories, and it has every 5 stories a huge gardening area, which is bringing green to the vertical. And you find this in Southeast Asia more and more often, that large construction is going vertical. I would call it vertical 2.0, because we had those exercises previously in residential construction, and they did not work very well, because there's a lack of quality if you live in high-rise buildings. But if you also try to bring green into this, and I've been there, it really works. You feel like being in a garden, then it adds another type of quality to this kind of living. The middle one is an award-winning project. It won the Holcim Bronze Award. It's a coastal protection system in New York City. And it shows also the need that you have to combine some construction elements like resiliency, like protecting New York City from the flood, with also an excellence in design. So if you have a closer look, those boundary lines or those protection lines are hardly visible. So they are opened for the standard, for the default scene or default scenario. And once there comes a flood, there are different doors, large doors with which you can close. So you have to think about how you can combine your design with the quality and the excellence which you want to provide to people. And then the last point is, on the right-hand side, you see the Campo di Siena. Siena is a city in Italy. And this is one of the, so if you ever go to Italy, go there first before you go to Rome. And this is something you learn in architecture study on day one, because it's really a beautiful, unique place. Interestingly, Siena, when this has been built in the late Middle Age or after Middle Age, had a very stringent construction code. So even the size and the shape of the windows has been determined. But yet, this just happened. This is a perfect design where no one really can explain why it happened and how it works. So it has been copied over and over, all the place. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, but you never were able to copy it. So my point would be, you need proper planning, you need good scenarios, you have to think a lot, but you also need those happy accidents that things really just work out and look nice. So thanks a lot. I hope that have been 10 minutes.
And the last speaker is Mr. J.T. Singh. Mr. J.T. Singh.
Yes. Good afternoon. Well, good evening. So that was a lot of good information about basic planning, basics, and basics are the most important, right? For making cities. A lot of people probably don't. If you're not an architect or planner, you might not understand a lot of that planner talk, and that's okay, because in fact, cities are not made by planners or even governments, right? Cities are made by entrepreneurs, and governments, for example, just set the tone. They send the long-term signals. They create the conditions for others, for the market to make the city. So the market is the one who innovates and makes cities, right? And that's becoming more and more obvious with these huge companies who are changing, say B, right? Who would have thought that these digital companies would be changing the face of cities? It's not planners who did that. It's not architects who did that. It's not government officials who did that, right? Airbnb is repurposing existing space in cities and creating hundreds and hundreds of jobs, and creating more density in cities, right? So what I want to talk about is agile and online cities, right? Right now, cities, this is the best time. You're talking about Colombo, being way at the bottom, but I can tell you right now, this is 2015, right? We're living in exponential technology times, right? Technology before was linear, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it's exponential, 1, 2, 5. By the time 10 steps, you're at 1 billion, right? So we're living in times of the iPhone, right? Just, I don't know, 40 years ago, this took up 2 floors at Stanford University, 100 times more expensive. Only the military could have it. And now it's in my pocket, 100 times faster, cheaper, smaller, right? It's become almost like the bicycle for the brain, right? It's an extension of our biology now. And because of this, it's transforming the urban fabric and the social fabric of cities. So Colombo, I can tell you, within 5 years, it could become a role model city for many other cities. I've been to over 250 cities in the world. And this is my first time in Colombo, but I've seen many cities with similar circumstances, similar size, similar environment, similar culture traits. So here's what I'm seeing right now. So I come in the area of global engagement. How can cities become well known in the world? Because the better the reputation of a city, the more likely it is to attract talent, to attract investment, to attract students, to attract research facilities, to attract film shoots, to attract all kinds of mobile activities that have become actually increasingly mobile, economic activities that have become mobile. So, so how does a person even, how do you compete with the cities that are in everyone's minds, the New York, the Londons, the Paris, the Hong Kong, right? Those handful of cities dominate our mental maps, right? But increasingly, there are more and more cities becoming into our mental maps, the Sao Paulos, the Beijing, the Shanghais, the Hyderabad, the Bangalores. And now these cities are coming up, mostly based on GDP and so forth, but also some cultural cities. Some smaller cities are competing with bigger cities based on their cultural assets or their geographic biodiversity assets, right? Think of the city in Bilbao, right? Curitiba in Brazil, based on its urban innovations. So how do you compete with those cities? So Colombo could compete with these cities if it really understands what Colombo has to offer to the world. What does Colombo have? What can Colombo create and export culturally, economically, that no other city can? And a lot of people will say, well, you have to do advertising, you have to do marketing. But I have to know that the best advertising is not advertising. The best marketing is not marketing. The trend I'm seeing is, if you can see, what I'm seeing is that when cities engage with the world, it's very different from nations. Nations are more ideological and high politics. But when cities engage with the rest of the world, or when I go to conferences where it's a lot of city mayors invited, and the kind of conversations they have with each other is very practical, because cities know the needs of the citizens. They're very close to the needs. It's about how do you pick up the garbage? It's what's a better way of creating social mobility? How can we have more healthier citizens? How can we improve education? Very, very practical conversations at the city level. So what I'm seeing is that if cities want to create global influence, what they need to do is create urban innovations and then export that to the rest of the world, right? What is Colombo doing in the area of sustainable job creation? What is Colombo doing in terms of energy? What is Colombo doing in urban design or what I call civic joy or culture and community, in public health or wellness? What is Colombo doing that other cities can emulate, right? And that is city diplomacy, right? No high politics, no ideological talks, just this is what we're doing to improve our citizens' life. This is what you can also do, exchanging ideas. That is what city diplomacy is and becoming. So there's no more need for these long shot billion-dollar infrastructure spending. We're living in digital times, right? You can create something that took 10 years in 2 years now, thanks to the internet, thanks to transformative technologies, which is social, mobile, cloud, big data. And you can affect all levels of the city, right? I like to look at cities as the hardware, the infrastructure, the roads, the buildings, and the light infrastructure. That's a term that a lot of people don't use, the light infrastructure. We always think it's this heavy-handed bridges and, in the software, the programming, the parks, the culture, and what I call the orgware, which is the governance, the public services, the regulations. And I can tell you the best innovations in today's times for cities is not technology and it's regulation innovation, right? What kind of stricter policies are governments creating? What kind of tighter regulations are cities creating that other cities can emulate? That's where the innovation is actually happening. And these transformative technologies can leapfrog cities ahead of cities that spent decades building the infrastructure, right? My favorite example is rapid bus transit systems that were innovated by Curitiba, right? You don't need subways. All you need is a dedicated bus lane. You create a bus, and it's basically an overland train. It stops at a bus stop. People get off, people get on very fast, keeps going. That's what you call an agile city, right? Another way cities can innovate is by changing the way they purchase solutions, right? The way they do these procurement that usually tend to favor larger companies, the Ciscos, the Japanese infrastructure firms, and so on. No, stop buying from them, right? Look at the Silicon Valley startups. Look at the startups in Stockholm, right? These cities are releasing their data to the public. Startups are coming in, using that data, and creating all kinds of solutions that are more nimble, agile, cost-efficient, and immediately deployable. And this is a good example of this is a picture of the rapid transit system, which started in Curitiba and now has been exported to hundreds of cities around the world, right? So you don't need a subway, you just need rapid bus transit systems, right? Quick little example. So how can Colombo, I get a phone call about once a week from some governments asking, JT, we want to be the Berlin of this country. We want to be the New York of Asia, so on and so forth. I'm like, no, don't do any marketing. Improve your city sucks. Improve your city first. Improve the experience, because in 2015, the cities that create experiences, platforms for interactions to happen between citizens, that create more agile innovations, create more agile social mobility, are the cities that are going to be respected, admired, and will attract young people, talented people. And really, cities are basically a collection of people, just like a company. A company is nothing but a collection of people, right? So cities are nothing but a collection of people. And if you can make interactions between these people, you have an innovative city. So once again, agile transport. A lot of people think that Uber is the only, the one who's transforming transportation in cities around the world. No, we have the Poo Bus, the first picture right there, which is, it runs on poop, right? In London, right? I'm pretty sure Sri Lanka has a lot of poop, right? Everyone, the whole world has plenty of poop. So a great innovation that could be adopted. Electric buses. Bridge is a bus service, private bus service, all based on data. They see where people are actually taking the buses, where they are actually going, and then customizing bus routes. Agile innovation. Chariot, also using big data to see where people actually want to go and where people actually work, and creating customized bus routes. And they use vans instead of buses, which have less regulations. They take up less space in the road, easier parking, and so forth. Amazing agile innovations. And the great part is, like I said, the worst cities in the world, if you look at them, are the overly planned cities, right? So planning is important, basic planning, but don't overplan it. Understand that a city must basically create the conditions, the long-term signals for entrepreneurs, right? The techies, the geeks, any area. And for the first time in humanity, a broader range of players are changing the face of cities, from academic institutions, startups, steady suppliers, digital communities, NGOs, multinationals, government agencies, citizen change makers, religious groups. All these are coming together now and recreating, reimagining infrastructure, right? So anyone could be a player. You don't have to understand planner talk, right? You don't have to understand, it's good to know what zoning is, it's good to know what land use is, and so on and so forth. All in all, my advice to Colombo, copy other cities. Steal ideas from Stockholm. Customize them. Cities have common problems, but the way you take a solution, you have to drastically customize it. Different cultures, different environment, every city is very unique. So you have to customize these solutions and create solutions, innovate solutions that are very unique, solve problems, and export those solutions. That's how you engage with the rest of the world and improve Colombo's reputation. Thank you.
LBR LBO Infrastructure Summit 2015, making Colombo a globally competitive city. Sponsors.
At HSBC, we understand when it's your business. It's never just business.
Airline partner.
Welcome aboard a new beginning. Sri Lankan Airlines, you're our world.
LBR LBO Infrastructure Summit 2015.
Good evening. I'm not good at sitting in one place, so I have to move around a little. I'm going to, when we were discussing this summit a few months back, Lakshman and I had some interesting conversations about what the appropriate models would be. I, for example, thought that Stockholm would be irrelevant to our reality. You can see who won the argument. The question is there a model to emulate? Or is it that we have to pick bits and pieces from here and there? So that's going to be my first question. But before I come to that question, I'd like to ask Sumila to clarify a thing that the Sri Lankans on the panel had some difficulty with. Is this Sri Lanka?
No.
It's some other country, some hypothetical place.
No, it's a real place.
But not Sri Lanka.
No, Hello?
Let me see. Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, no, the data are not for Sri Lanka. It's a real country, and the data are from about 15,000 households in 15 cities of that country.
Ah, okay, because we've done surveys of garbage collection in Colombo, and we basically got flat answers because the garbage collection was actually quite satisfactory.
It was working.
In Colombo, it was working. I mean, it's not working really. Downstream, it's working very poorly. There are some people who are suffering because we are not processing the garbage. But in terms of getting the garbage out of people's sight, we were doing quite well. This was a few years back. So both Diana and I were quite disturbed about this picture, saying, how could this be? This cannot be our country, right?
It's Kenya, actually.
Ah, okay.
And it's data from
Makes us all
just about
feel
a
good.
year or so ago.
Right.
Right.
So the theme that, somewhere around 5-6 years ago, or maybe more, about 2006, the world tipped from a majority of people living in rural areas to a majority of people living in urban areas. And one of the things that happened as a result of that tipping is that we had a plethora of terms, of buzzwords. So we have smart cities, we have diploma cities, we have, what else has there been used today? You didn't use any term, right? Inclusive cities, right? And Lakshman interestingly picked, my choice was responsive city. But Lakshman interestingly picked globally competitive city. I think there's a lot of merit to his choice, because Sri Lanka is, quite contrary to a lot of people who live here, to their perceptions, we are extraordinarily globalized in terms of dependence on exports, dependence on imports, dependence on income for people who travel abroad, percentage of people who travel abroad, etc. We are extraordinarily globalized. And it is very clear that we have to deal with this competition with other countries, with other cities. So I would like to pose as the first question. I'm going to only ask two people, and Mr. Zetterberg, you're excluded from this question because I know your answer. What is the comparator city that you'd like to benchmark, you think Sri Lanka should be benchmarked against? Professor Mendes.
I think as the previous speaker mentioned, Colombo must develop its own. If we go to benchmark, and if we go to copy for the sake of copying and not pick up things, ideas must be picked up. But Colombo's design, Colombo's approach to this must be not an introvert, but ability to create its own city that it can live with.
So you're not giving a clear answer. You disagree with the idea of benchmarking.
Benchmarking theoretically is a good thing to pick up ideas, but not to copy. Not to copy.
I think Michael pointed out that Siena, everybody has tried to copy, but no one has succeeded. So I hope you don't answer my question in terms of Siena.
No, of course not. And I would agree that you have to find your own identity for whatever you're doing. But I think copying with pride is a good thing to do. And so I like things that Singapore is doing, especially in terms of, number one, being efficient, really down to the last detail, because they have this real need for being efficient on everything, material, energy, and also driving innovation. They're really a very vibrant city on moving forward on innovation. In terms of just beauty, of course, there are some other Italian cities which are nice as well. In terms of dynamic, also, I think one could look at still some American cities in Silicon Valley or in California. There are also some cities which have had hard times and still are recovering.
Despite the sprawl, despite the traffic?
No, I wouldn't take this, not at all. I would just take the way how they look forward and how their ability to move 180 degrees around once they have figured out that something is a wrong direction. That is something I admire at the American attitude, that they don't stick too long to false ideas once they have acknowledged it's wrong.
Olaf, you talked about the factors for Sweden, for Stockholm, and when did you say the underground was built?
It was built after the Second World War, but the decision was taken in the city council in 1941 when Hitler's army dominated the whole
41
continent.
And then 8
And
years,
then it started. It took 10 years to build it, and it was integrated in the beginning of the 50s. But can I comment on this about the role model city? Because of course I'm not advocating for you to bring up, I mean, Stockholm or Siena as a kind of city that you're gonna be like, because every city has to be unique, of course. But there are some general, I would say, take away from what I try to say, and that is, of course, I must say, public transportation needs some infrastructure. You need that bus lane, of course, and that is infrastructure. You must admit that. Okay, good. So you need some of it. And you need the fiber optics cable grid. That's the infrastructure too. Yeah, that can't be solved by Uber. So that's my point. So, but you have to pick up from different cities and be unique, because all cities that has been successful are unique. They are not claiming that they are the New York of Scandinavia or the London of Asia or something. That is totally wrong, because you will end up on a good day to be number 2.
Precisely. So, for example, let's look at waste management in the United States. One company called Waste Management, that's the name of the company, dominates. It's a giant. No one could compete with them. A new startup called Rubicon Global just got $50 million in backing. Has created an online platform for smaller garbage hauling companies and recycling companies to connect with residentials and corporations, which is before they couldn't compete with waste management and the waste management giants, right? So again, thanks to digital technologies and platform technologies, is transforming a whole industry that was dominated by one player, right? So huge infrastructure areas are being transformed in a very, and creating jobs, creating more opportunities and a level playing field for other organizations and smaller startups, more nimble startups. So what I meant was you need the basic infrastructure, you need sewage, you need running water and so on and so forth, but look around for how digital technologies can streamline that and make it faster, make it more nimble, and dematerialize a lot of urban infrastructure, right? Like, for example, DVDs to MP3s, there's a lot of other ways we can dematerialize cities and make them sustainable.
No, you'll have another shot at this tomorrow, but would you like to comment on what the appropriate adjective is, the way you see the world?
Yeah, well,
competitive,
yeah,
inclusive.
I think it's interesting. I mean, hearing all these speakers, but in terms of your first question of where would you benchmark, I would agree with Professor Mendes that we need to find really what will work for us. So I don't think you can benchmark city to city, but I think you can look at comparator cities for certain pieces and say, look, let's take transport, for example. Who do we really want to be like, and who do we aspire to be in terms of mass transit, for example? Who do we want to be like in terms of housing? Who has really good models of waste management? So I think you can take pieces from different cities and assemble something to deal with the models or deal with the issues that we have. And I think that's really the way.
I'm getting a lot of questions from the audience about waste management and traffic congestion. So would you like to talk about the comparators in either of these areas?
Yeah, so
Traffic
waste management, I think
Stockholm
is probably one of the best in the world. And I think that was the ACE card.
I think you're now in a situation where you're importing other people's garbage to recycle, right?
Yes, we have a lot of incineration plants to work with the heating system and the district heating system. But we are not. I will downsize our glory a little bit, because there are some parts of the waste management system that is not so efficient, actually. A lot of trucks going around in the city. But we have in some new areas introduced a vacuum system where you transport by vacuum in pipes the garbage, and that has been quite successful. And the company actually developed there is now selling this product all over the world. It's very expensive, I must say, very expensive. So if you don't have so much money here in Colombo, don't start with that.
Yes, Michael.
And this question of what is the right infrastructure brings us all of a sudden to the question, what is the right governance? Because as you pointed out in Stockholm, this has been a long-lasting process of development and planning and then financing in the end. And I'm now coming from Switzerland, and we are now I'm not a Swiss, but Switzerland is now inaugurating a 50-kilometer tunnel through the Alps, which has been started planning also in the 40s, 50s. So after 60 years of planning and realization, you can have great ideas, but it takes time, and also then it takes the governance to overcome this time. So this lasts longer than 4 years term of a government, and you have to have this governance which really wants such kind of infrastructure, which is willing to also fund it on a long period of time.
Does it mean that we should have a kind of an appointed authority for metro governance for the megapolis? Is that what you're suggesting? Because when you have elections, it's almost a pattern here that people change parties.
I would assume that it's a mixture of really having in-house experts on how infrastructure works and how to plan it. So this is an administrational task, but also the backup by governance, which is then a political target. So I think you need definitely both the expertise and the governance and the support.
If I could,
Go ahead.
If I could just respond to that quickly, I absolutely agree. I think Sri Lanka has to do a better job of planning. Clearly, it has to do a lot better job of execution. And I think that's going to be the real challenge. Now, I think we've launched into this phase of doing a lot of in-depth planning. So I think a lot of that is happening, and a lot of these new ideas are coming in. We're talking to lots of different places, but the question comes down to, when it comes down to putting stuff in the ground or getting stuff done, what are the systems that are going to be in place? How do we govern? What are what works, what doesn't? What kind of capital do we get? Are we really ready to embrace private capital, for example? Are we ready to do the kind of diligence, the kind of policy reforms that we will need to make some of these big initiatives happen? That's the question, and I think that's something that's squarely where we need to where we really need to spend a lot of time.
I was planning to ask a few more questions on my side, but the audience has to be given at least half an hour, and that's where we are now. So let me take some of these questions from the audience. While it is lovely and exciting to build shining cities and to hope economic growth will follow, why don't we also create a long-term facility to start the companies that can design products that the world wants to buy? So basically this is about this, and I think there was another one about cities as engines of growth, as producing economic growth, rather than the conception that Professor Mendes talked about, cities as living off the rural areas. So by developing these cities, can we actually get economic growth generated? Maybe Sumila?
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, the research that I showed a little bit in my presentation clearly shows that South Asia, Sri Lanka and South Asia as a region as a whole is not leveraging urbanization for economic growth as much as it could. Sri Lanka is a little bit better on livability, and you can see certain agglomeration economies, but there is no one-to-one relationship between the urbanization level today in Sri Lanka and economic growth. So it's critical that...
But on that, now,
yes.
Do you accept the minister's number, which is 48%?
Yes, actually.
And the number that has been kicked around, which is 15%.
Yes, I totally agree with the minister. All of South Asia understates its urbanization level relative to, say, Latin America. So our figures were roughly the same. I think the statistics in terms of what is rated as urban in Sri Lanka gives you 14 to 18%. And if you look at the agglomeration, it's about 47%. Urban. And so why is it in India, it's the same story? And the reason has traditionally been that the rural areas got more national subsidy programs, and no administration wanted to be called urban. That dynamic may be shifting, but at the very least, if the council that is managing an urban area is a rural council, you're not going to see the kind of planning and urban management you need to see for productive urban growth and management. So what I'm saying is, for example, if you have a region in which a large proportion in terms of governance, large number of people sitting on the council are from rural areas, then the taxation from urban areas can go towards rural investment as opposed to being plowed back into urban investment, and which is required to keep pace with the growing population and the demand in urban areas, which is in turn required to reduce the congestion effects that you're seeing, the shortages in infrastructure, water supply, in housing and things like that.
I feel you're talking about Karnataka and Bangalore.
Also,
that's the tension where Karnataka, the state government, is always getting in the way of Bengaluru being developed.
Certainly, I think India's biggest problem in urban development is its governance structure, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's exactly the same in Sri Lanka.
So we have to empower the city governments, the local governments, versus the provincial governments. Professor Mendes?
I think that's putting it. It's not only empowering, but making the reforms and let the power structures through the reform process show the ability to accept that. The issue is not that they don't have the powers legally, it's the way that they are not.
This question that came from the audience is about innovation, creating an environment where people can innovate. Now, they were also talking about loans and all those kinds of things. Let's leave the loans out. Is creating a habitable, enjoyable, branded, exciting city enough to attract innovative companies, or do we need more?
Attracting innovation-oriented talent is not only the design and the beauty. Singapore, I think, is expected to provide that kind of image, that if you have beauty, you can also attract talent. It does come that way. One doesn't follow one after the other. The issue is getting the governance right, which I think the previous speaker also mentioned. If that image of efficiency and you know, the usual things that come with slow decision making are eliminated, that's the part that attracts the innovation to come without being restricted. No sooner you have 10 institutions to go without a one-stop shop kind of talk.
I think there's a lot of interest in this question. So, JT?
Okay.
JT, go ahead.
Okay, so some practicality in terms of how do you create innovation in cities. Where are the universities in Colombo? Build an ecosystem around those. That's where innovation actually starts to happen. That's where interactions happen. Companies start to build around those because they want talent. They want young talent. Students get early exposure to the corporate world. This whole notion that universities should be way outside cities is very wrong. They create bubbles. They create students that come out of university having no exposure to the real world. Create an ecosystem around that. Create micro infrastructure, libraries. Have digital labs in libraries, not just about books. Have 3D printers in them. Have tools where people could come in and produce things, right? Create incubators places. Invest in incubators where you have local advisors who have entrepreneurial experience to give advice. Those are the basics to start spurring education, innovation, right? It's interactions. When you create, when one person meets, it's like this conference. You have to emulate this conference on an everyday basis, in a real-time basis in cities, right? Where people interact, bump into each other. I could be an artist, you can be a engineer. What comes out when you combine your expertise with my expertise? Something very new and innovative. And then we're living in 2015, we're forgetting that. Always we forget that, right? The cost of barrier into is more cheaper than ever before. We have all kinds of free tools thanks to the Googleization of the world, right? We have all kinds of knowledge resources thanks to the internet again. We have, you know, you can have cafes. A lot of people work out of cafes. Cafe culture is actually my biggest recommendation for cities that want to spur innovation. If you look at the best cities in the world, they have a big, huge cafe culture.
You would be happy to learn that Colombo is awash in cafes now. Naina.
I just like to pass that question into two, really, because I think to spur innovation and to really make these things happen, there's two things that are required. One is the physical. The physical you cannot get away from. The infrastructure, the open spaces, make them a nice place to live, as you were saying. But I do not think that is enough. That's often mistaken for being enough. To make what JT talks about happen requires a really good policy environment for entrepreneurs to start businesses easily, to fail and pick up again easily, to connect with the world easily. For like Sri Lanka, it's not really that easy to fail at the moment. If anybody started and tried to shut down a business, it takes a year to shut it down. It takes a week to start it up. So failure is really bad. We still can't take PayPal. So I think there's simple enabling things which are soft, really in the policy realm that need to happen to make these ecosystems work and make
the country that is the most cheap to visit? I don't think so. You look for the country that, and then if expensive, you're not looking for the cheapest vacation country to go to. So I a little bit warn you about the incentive thing. That's my.
Yeah, but I think his point was not about incentives. It's the loans that came from the audience. But your point was about creating the business environment.
I think basically it needs to go beyond physical. Yeah. It goes in the policy.
But I would also add that a few years back, I was involved in negotiations that led to the expansion of the business process outsourcing industry here in Colombo, which is you could say a sort of low-end IT-enabled sector. And one of the difficulties that we had was they wanted their clients to be able to get from the airport to the sites, to the office parks, the buildings, relatively quickly. So the traffic congestion is a serious issue. So you can't say that is IT-based and infrastructure doesn't matter. So I was trying to sell them Malame, which was designated by the government as the IT zone, and I had no success whatsoever. And now Malabé will become more attractive because it's now proximate to the circular highway. So I can sell Malabé now, but I couldn't sell it in 2002, 2003. So I think we need to look at all these aspects. Now I want to get to the audience has a great interest in garbage. So lots of questions on garbage. And I have a great interest in garbage too. So I'm very sympathetic to this. Now I want to correct a little bit of this, which is, one is that the people of Colombo don't really have a garbage problem. Their garbage is collected. It's downstream that we got problems. And downstream problems are concentrated in particular areas. The shores of the Bolgoda Lake and Mitotamul. Those are the two places where this is going on. Somebody had written about Blumendal, but we ruined Blumendal long before. We are not doing it anymore. So these are the two places that we are creating extraordinary discomfort for our people. And of course, we had plans to ship it out by train. And looks like that one is also dead in the water. So, Professor Mendes, any thoughts on this subject?
I would be a billionaire if I had a solution quick fix to that. I think technology has to come in. The sheer aspect of collecting and dumping is not the best solution, and technologically speaking. The issue now is whether there has been a concerted effort to find a way forward. Our amount that we collect, 7 tons or 8 tons per day, is not that big in terms of what happens in most countries, if you want to emulate. The issue is there been tested or tried out to see whether there are other technological options that can be done. As you said, one option is take it by train to Puttalam or wherever, and then somebody there will say, not in my backyard. Absolutely. So if that is the case, then we have to find a way out technologically, because if people don't want to accept the dumping, either by transfer or by collection, let the companies come out with ideas. Why should the government be the only one?
So isn't this an ideal problem for the megapolis? Because if Colombo is too small, which I agree Colombo is too small, but if we process all the garbage from all the urban conglomerations in the Western province, then do we not have proper scale for efficient processing? Yes, Nayan.
Actually, I think we so
even in Colombo or Colombo plus?
Colombo produces about 600 tons of garbage a day. The greater Colombo region produces about 1,600 tons of garbage a day. And you're right, right now it actually gets dumped in two places, one in Mitotomul and one in Karadiana. So we actually have a few solutions that we are working on. The megapolis is very much part of this. Because what we have, the problem we have is we dump garbage, we don't process it.
There is a degree of processing that happens at Karadiana.
Yeah, but it's marginal at best, right? So what we have to do is find ways to process it at these sites, and that's an active debate going on now. It's at least in my personal opinion, you have to introduce some waste to energy technologies to manage waste at these sites. There is also, of course, the plan of Arua Kalu, and that is not dead. It's actually ongoing. There's an environmental impact assessment ongoing on the viability of that. So I think again, the problem is downstream, but the introduction of some processing is required. What we're looking at is trying to get that processing done through private sector investors. We understand that there's some policy impediments to doing that, because just on the electricity tariffs alone, it's not viable. So we need to introduce some ways to improve the viability of these, whether it's an increase in preferential tariff or whether it's some kind of tipping fee. So there's policy measures that need to be worked out. But I'm very confident that you can solve them, and we're in active discussion on these. And we expect we'll actually go to market with something in the next couple of months, in fact, for one of the major sites.
Yes, Michael.
So I would try another statement on this, making this up while talking. I wonder whether this is not also a matter of general mentality, because we have this garbage problem all over the world. And by the way, I'm also not sure whether digital could be the solution, or is not rather the problem of it, because since we have this digital services which deliver your shoes and your goods and whatever in time to your house, since then we have a lot of more garbage than when we went to the store and purchased our stuff there. It was a little bit the same 20 years ago with the digitalization and with the printers coming up. Everyone told us there will be no more paper needed, because you just make your document on your computer and then print it out and that's it. The opposite was true. We never had more paper consumption since then, because you print it out, something is wrong, you can change it easily, you print it out again. So it's about the mentality of how can we close loops again. It is the mentality about valuing such materials, valuing this plastic can of water as a resource, and not dumping it somewhere, just thinking about how you can reuse or recycle this in a way that you don't leave any trace, which is difficult because it's not economically a case at the moment. This is too cheap compared to my labor and compared to other costs. This is far too cheap. So to overcome this, to a way of thinking, what are we doing with our resources and how can we circulate them back to the cradle?
Yeah, I just want to say there is no one solution, right? You have to have an army of solutions for solving the waste problem, right? Reducing waste, controlling waste, processing waste, closing the loop. The circular economy is a huge topic right now. How do you take garbage and repurpose it? So there is no virgin materials anymore, right? You're just reusing the materials again and again in a circle. So, it needs creative governance, right? For example, Bangalore is actually one of the most innovative waste management city in the world actually right now. What they've noticed, and you need a bit of anthropology. You need to understand the city, how it works, what's going on in the city. And what Bangalore noticed was that there's this huge informal recycling collectors, right? These people who go around collecting plastic or cardboards and so on, and selling those. What they did then was formalize those informal garbage recycle collectors, right? Give them a uniform and created a company out of it, paid them a little bit, and now they have this little mini economy going on. So that was one.
That is
solution.
for garbage collection.
Yeah, there is.
Sri Lanka has privatized garbage collection in many of our cities.
No,
it works perfectly.
They converted informal garbage
our problem is downstream.
Right.
Our problem is not in collecting the garbage. We actually have a clean city. It's downstream where we put it there and forget about it.
Okay, so you can't look at like Japan or Stockholm with the expensive incinerators, right? They're way too expensive. You have to look at ways of stricter regulations, tighter regulations, right? On what kind of products are allowed. You guys serve food on banana leaves in a lot of. That's a good culture to actually strengthen.
I can tell you that I went to school with taking my lunch in a banana leaf, and there's actual shortage of banana leaf in this country.
Strengthen that culture.
This is the kind of stuff I hear all the time. It doesn't make any sense. Unfortunately, when you live in a city, you live in an apartment block, how on earth are you going to get banana leaf to pack your lunch? It wasn't possible when I lived in the suburb of Kotte those days. It's not possible now, increasingly. Let me move on to another question that the audience is asking about funding. They want to know how all this will be paid for. But I'm going to combine, because we are running out of time, I'm going to combine it with another question. There's several questions about the mass transit lines. Some are saying that the first mass transit line is going to be from the airport to Colombo. I don't think so. I think the original plan was Malabé to the city of Colombo. My understanding of those was that they were going to be public-private partnerships, and that most of the money would come, some stories I have heard, that all the money would come from the investor, and they would then be able to set the prices. So the question is in two parts. Some people like Sumila would be able to talk about funding per se. I hope somebody else will talk about public-private partnerships or complete private concession model as a solution. Nayana, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to start. I think the bottom line on the mass transit in Sri Lanka, it needs to happen clearly. I think we've got a whole panel on it, so I'm not going to spend too much time. But the fact is, I think the government will need to spend some amount on the capital cost. The operations and maintenance can be done. The concession for operations can be done privately. And I think the fare box is marginal at best. So in my opinion, the way to unlock this, the only way Sri Lanka can really unlock mass transit is if they take station-linked or transit-linked real estate very, very seriously. That's the way it's done in Japan. That's the way it's done in Singapore. That's the way it can be done in Sri Lanka. It basically, you introduce transit, it drives up real estate values along those corridors. If you join that, if you link that with land use controls that allow the extraction of higher values and let that value extraction cross-subsidize the transit construction cost or the operations, that's the way Sri Lanka will have to do it. I don't think there's a model out there. I think the PPP is an often overused word to think that the private sector will pay everything. I don't think that will happen. I think the state will have to spend something. But I think the operations of these can be incredibly attractive and viable. And if you look at it from an economic perspective, I think going into mass transit and making them happen is fundamental to the success of Colombo. It's fundamental transformation that we have to make. So we have to make it happen one way or the other.
So Sumila, just to preface the question to you, Colombo is currently the beneficiary of about $500 million in World Bank and ADB money. World Bank is about 225, and the ADB sewerage project is also in that same range. Is this enough? Or what do you think? What's your response? How will we pay for all these improvements?
Okay, clearly it's not enough. Otherwise, you wouldn't have asked me the question. And also, I mean, the first estimate for the train, the mass transit system, somebody mentioned was $2.9 billion. So clearly, this kind of money is a very large amount of money. And the question is, how do you think about it? I think there are two pieces to this. First, you have to figure out what are the kinds of things that you as a government want to subsidize. And I think the idea that, I completely agree with Nayana, I don't know of very many mass transit systems that are completely running on fare box. Nowhere, Chicago, New York, DC, Stockholm, it just doesn't happen. And so the question that arises in transport policy is, if the roads are free and the government is paying for them, then why is it that mass transit has to be fully recovered from the fare box? So I think there is something that you need to think about there. The second point that Nayana made is also very important. You can put in a line and the real estate values around it will go up. But do you have a system for densifying that corridor by changing the zoning regulations and FSI? And what is your system for capturing the improvement that's coming? So for example, in the train system or the subway system that was built in Delhi, the transport system sits alone and separate from the land use plan. And so it's the transport authority that's building it and the linkage between. That is not the case, for example, in Hong Kong, where the land use and the train station designs were very closely integrated. So that's another very good point that Nayana made that I want to underscore. The thing about funding, the other piece that you asked me about, well, I think there needs to be further decentralization of fiscal responsibility to the city level. There needs to be a better effort on tax collection, whether it's property taxes, betterment levies, and things like that. There also needs to be a stronger intergovernmental system where the transfers from the center to cities or states all sources are necessary: taxation, intergovernmental transfers, external financing on good terms, and prudent expenditure, right? So you won't be able to fund too many projects that run into billions of dollars and recover 5 or 10% of costs. So you need a framework for prioritizing which places those subsidies will go. And the framework could be things like, what is it that gets you to your goal of an inclusive or green city, where the citizens have a livable environment and a decent chance of having a decent standard of living. So there can be no innovative city if all the workers have to live 75 kilometers out because only the owners of those innovative companies can afford to live in the city. That won't work.
So that's a central question, actually a question that was asked of the minister, but I didn't want to bring it up because the minister is no longer here, but I'll pose it to you. One of the challenges, I think from what you may have seen of Colombo is not any kind of high-rise city. It's quite low-rise. And the difficulty, of course, is getting this density up. And one of the great challenges we had in the last few years was that there was a lot of opposition to putting people who were being moved out of illegal settlements, and in some cases legal settlements that were sitting on valuable real estate into, I think, 15 floors, 10, 15 floor buildings. I can remember I made the argument that people can't handle elevators. They mess up elevators. You require a certain culture to deal with elevators. And I was arguing for 4 stories. And I was posed the challenge, okay, I'll give you 4, but you'll have to go to Homagam. Because that's where the land is, for buildings that are 4 stories high. If you want to keep the people inside the city, you'll have to live with 15-story housing blocks. So how does one deal with that challenge? Any thoughts? How do we deal with low income?
With the elevators, I don't know. But on the other question, maybe there were so many wise comments on the panel. But just to add something, in the case of Stockholm, for example, the city of Stockholm get hold of the land in the inner city when the underground metro was built, and then had land lease contracts, and then every year got good incomes out of those land lease contracts. That is one way of doing it. And then to make a statement that is not so political correct, but A couple of years ago, I was in Cape Town, and they said that it was extremely important in the commuter trains to have first class, because the first class passengers who used the commuter trains, they paid a lot of money, and the other ones who was traveling, in second or third class, they didn't pay that much. But it was extremely important to have this first class departments of the train. It's not politically correct, I know, but I say it. But I'm just quoting what my colleague in Cape Town said.
Yeah. Yes, Nan.
So this is a problem we're actively dealing with. So I'm happy to speak a couple of words on it. I think we're actually UDA is working on this plan to move people into 10-story buildings. So we have 65,000 slums and shanty houses in Colombo, and they occupy 900 acres of real estate. So there is really no land shortages in Colombo. There is land underutilization. That's a core problem. So the original plan for building high rises was, let's move people into high rises and then free up all this land, and there's plenty of space for commercial real estate. What we've then found, and we're dealing with now, is that really doesn't work, as Rohan said, because we're moving communities that are used to living on the ground with very interesting social networks into vertical situations that doesn't always work. So now what we're trying to do, we understand that the social issues are just as important as the physical issues. And we're now working with some of these communities. We're actually doing some pilots in one of these communities to, in a new building that we're going in, to really work with them socially and look not as, look, we're going to move you from this slum into what may become a future vertical slum, but really look and say, what do you need to transform your life? And how can this real estate play a role in that? So, I mean, just to put it in context, you're taking somebody that lives in 100 or 200 square feet wood shack, and you're putting them into a 400 to 500 square foot apartment that is valued at 4 million rupees, just construction cost alone. So there's a huge, and you're legalizing and formalizing them, and you're giving them collateral in a completely different way. But what we have not done, and what we're starting to do, is really engage them on livelihoods, on education, on empowering them, so that this transformation is actually complete. It's not just a physical, but really support them through this transition. And also look at optionality, not forcing everybody to go into these, but give people the option and have a mix of options of, yes, some 4-story, some high rise. But how are you going to clear the land? I don't think you need to clear all the land. I don't think you need to clear.
What about illegal settlements? People who are living by the canals.
Most of these 65,000 are illegal. So our stance is this: these people, you can look at it as, look, they're pests, or you can look at them as a resource. I mean, these people are the ones that make the city work. They're the maids, they're the drivers. They're
so
the
you
street
agree
cleaners.
They should be kept in the city?
I absolutely think they should be kept as close as possible to the city, as much as possible in the city. It needs to happen.
So you got to increase the density. How are we going to do that? Increase the density without 15-floor buildings?
No, I think even if you go to 4 stories, even if you go to 6 stories, it's a mix that you actually can accomplish it. Because if you look at the settlements, and even if you go to 4 story, you do economize. You don't get as much land clearing as we might have originally planned. But by offering a mix of solutions, there are some parties that would be perfectly fine in a high rise. Some will not be, and that's where I think the optionality has to come in. You can't take 65,000 people and give them one solution. 65,000 people need multiple solutions, and through those multiple solutions, you can find a problem.
Well,
but
Singapore did it, but
Singapore's not a democracy,
with a lot of
right?
rules.
So we
compare.
prevented
you from doing X and Y and Z.
We get compared to Singapore ad nauseum, right? I personally have an issue with that. I think Singapore is great. Yes, it's beautiful. All that is good.
No, I'm talking about taking people who are living in slum-like conditions and moving them into the HDC housing.
Yeah. So
in the 70s,
there's a success story there, but the enforcement ability of a government of Singapore is fundamentally different than the enforcement ability of Sri Lanka. I mean,
good point. And I would also say these high-rise solutions are rather the top end of solutions of bringing people in housing efficiently. And we are involved in some projects in India and also in Indonesia, which we call urban acupuncture, and it's exactly the same. So we we tend to leave people, or we support leaving people in those informal settlements, because that's where they're at home, and that's what they love, and that's where they can grow. So they will grow out of this informal settlement, and they, as you put it, they are operating the city. And so you can make 4 stories is high, but you can make 2 or 3 stories within those constructions with those people, involving those people, enhancing them, training them on working and masonry capabilities, and then grow a formal settlement slowly out of an informal one. It works. And then it even can become really beautiful.
Yes, I think we'll give Sumila the last word.
That's a real privilege. I'm just coming from India, where we were looking at sites and services projects that were funded by the World Bank, the last of which closed 20 years ago. When they were finished, everybody said, oh, these are a failure. They took too long to implement, and there's nobody there. And 20 years later, these are thriving communities that are up to 5 stories high on 25 and 21 square meter plots, and some of them are 40, 50, 60, 70. At the time when these ideas were introduced in the late 70s all over the world, nobody wanted to buy into these ideas, because we wouldn't want people to live like cattle, you see. So the ideas were too far ahead of their time. And it took 20 years for these to become multi-story and hyper-dense settlements. And not all of them. There are some that were poorly located and were never occupied, but the vast majority in Chennai and Mumbai, which is where I was just last week, are thriving. So I think there are several different options. Multi-story is only one. I think small plotted developments that are incrementally increased by people who can build over time are a solution, but they take time. All urban development takes time. In a 5-year project or a 5-year political term, you will not see the result. But if you put that framework in place and give it time, it will get there. So I think it's very important to look at a series of options and start that housing discussion again. I think too many cities, from New York to Paris to Colombo to Delhi, have given up on having affordable housing in the city. And we cannot afford to have cities that are completely divided, where the rich live in multi-million-dollar apartments in New York, and the apartments in New York are empty because they're owned by the rich people from Saudi Arabia, from China, from India, and the people there cannot afford to live there. So that kind of sort of non-inclusive city development is not the goal we want to go towards. Thank you.
I thought you'd leave me with an optimistic note.
Yes, it takes time.
I think it's not really optimistic, because it takes time, and time is what we do not have in this country. So maybe it's a mixed optimistic, pessimistic note. So with that, I have been instructed to shut down the session. We could go on for another hour easily. I'm sorry I apologize to the audience for not doing justice to all their questions, but I did the best I could given this large panel. So let me thank you on behalf of the audience and on behalf of the organizers for a wonderful start to what I hope will be a very exciting infrastructure summit.
Just few things. There were questions about funding and transportation. We will preserve those questions, and we will have one session dedicated to transportation and another session on funding. And there were some questions about digital infrastructure. We'll try to take up those questions. We are sorry that we can't take all the questions, as Rohan mentioned, but we will see whether we can, provide answers. We can email these questions to our resource personnel. Somebody mentioned in the panel, I think it is Michael, that need to bring universities and industry together. And I'm failing in my duty if I don't mention this. We have 3 companies who have come forward, Holcim, 3M, and Access Engineering. There are 20 undergraduates from University of Mogador here today, sponsored by them. And we continue to try to bring University of Mogador graduates, undergraduates, and other university undergraduates, as well as academia and research staff in all our sessions. I just want to mention a few more things. Please do download the mobile app if you haven't done that. And on lbo.lk/summit, you will see the presentations of tomorrow's sessions. Because some of these presentations are very long and they're detailed, we will not have time to go through all those slides. So it is better if you can have a look and download them to your mobile devices. So we could you could refer to them. So that's about. So it's 8:30. So it's time to wind up the opening session. What we intend to do is create that excitement, create that aspiration, and tomorrow is the real reality check, where we'll get down to nuts and bolts and getting down to, okay, how are we going to do things in the city? So Rohan, thank the our panel on behalf of me as well as you, but I would like to thank them once again. Thank you so much for taking time. And Sumila, Ole, Michael and JT, they all flew in for this summit. And it's a great honor. And we are so privileged to have you. And we are humbled by your generosity of, donating your time and sharing your expertise with us. Thank you so much, Professor Willie Mendes. No urban development session is complete without you. And we are going to see both Michael and Naina. Naina, thank you so much. And Naina and Michael will be on tomorrow's first session, continuing the dialogue. And we will have 4 interesting, stimulating sessions to expect. So ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to invite you for cocktails now. And please put your hands together once again and thank our panel. Thank you so much.
Lbo Infrastructure Summit 2015, making Colombo a globally competitive city. Sponsors:
In cities around the world, many people are living and doing various activities such as commuting, shopping, and traveling. Urban transportation systems are supporting such activities and introduced to fit with the characteristics of each location. Hitachi aims to bring about greater convenience and comfort to people in cities. One of the ways to do this is our monorail system, which is currently changing the role of urban transportation in many parts of the world. In introducing a new urban transportation system, many factors must be carefully taken into account, such as transportation capacity, construction cost, and influence to the environment in terms of noise, sunlight obstruction, and so forth. Moreover, energy-saving greenhouse gas emissions also have to be considered these days. Hitachi's straddle-type monorail system overcomes all such issues and brings a more convenient